Hey all, I'm Tyler Olson, host of this podcast, A Good Problem to Have. Today we're going to be talking about that first attending paycheck, a really good problem to have, but one that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of things going on professionally and financially during the transition from training to attendinghood. And I want to talk about primarily three areas that you can take action today if this is your situation. And then we'll carry on with application, both in pragmatic and in behavioral terms. So you get that first attending paycheck. It's a good problem to have because you're all of a sudden your checking account, it gets like $7,000. Boom. 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, depending on the specialty that you're in. In any event, all of those numbers on just one paycheck is usually it can be even more than double what you were making an entire month in training. So you've been living your life the past 3 to 9 years, or possibly more, living on $3,000, $4,000 a month, and not having really any autonomy, maybe gradually a little bit more, but there's a lot that's changing. And so you get done with training, fellowship, residency, whatever it is, and now you got your first big job and your first big paycheck. And I can't even count how many times I've talked with doctors who are stuck in this decision paralysis because it's just an overwhelming amount of money. And it's not just one time. It's one thing if it's like, oh, well, I did some moonlighting and I got to do it for 2 months and wow, this is great. I got like $20,000. That in itself leads to some decision paralysis. But this is going to be every single month or maybe every 2 weeks, whatever your pay period structure is. And the question is, what do I do with it? And so we're going to talk about 3 steps that you can take today. First, a lot of trainees have racked up credit card debt. So if that's you, you are not alone. But if you've got the credit card debt and it's 15, 20, 25% interest, it is time to knock that out. Now, the amount that you should do toward it, that you should pay toward it each paycheck is going to vary by what your fixed expenses are. So your rent, mortgage payment, car payment, any other life expenses that you have. It's not like you can take the entire $10,000 check and just throw it all at the credit card debt at once. That may not be wise. So the step of paying off your credit card debt, that's the goal. But where you start is evaluating your current monthly living expenses. And if you've taken the steps while you're in training to already make a budget, you may readily have that data in front of you and know, hey, it costs me $4,000 per month to live, or it costs me $6,000 to live, $6,000 per month to live. The numbers might creep up higher and higher, especially if you have a spouse or partner who's also earning an income while you're in training, so you weren't just dependent on that trainee income. In any event, you've got to know what it's costing you to live currently and make sure that you're at least covering that. But the credit card debt can get all the attention after that. So build out your monthly budget and see this paycheck's going to come in. How much needs to cover my living expenses for this month? And then what's left over after that? The cadence of your pay is also relevant. So if you're getting $7,000 on your next paycheck and then you're going to get another one in 2 weeks, then you really should be evaluating from a $14,000 monthly take-home pay amount. Whereas if you're getting paid once a month, then you would just take that single amount and you would subtract your known average living expenses. Once you've sorted that out and you know how much you can direct toward your credit card payment, then you can start to estimate when the credit card debt will be gone. Let's say you have $21,000 in credit card debt And based on your living expenses and your paycheck that you just ran the numbers on, let's say that you've got $7,000 left over after that's cared for. You could do up to $7,000 per month toward the credit card debt, and you'd have it gone in 3 months. Now, you may not want to do that entirely, again, like toward the credit card debt, because if you have credit card debt, there's a decent chance that you have no savings. And you don't necessarily want to leave yourself without savings and gutting your checking account with every paycheck because, expenses come up, right? So that's where step number 2 comes into play. Building up an emergency fund. An emergency fund is just cash that is not invested. Usually, I recommend storing it in a high yield savings account because it's FDIC insured, usually earns higher interest rates than your primary bank account. Bricks and mortar banks tend to pay like that 0.01% interest rate, which is not great, but high yield savings account locations like Wealthfront, Ally, Laurel Road, they have high yield interest rates on their savings accounts, and you could put the money in there. The reason I'm mentioning this as a second option that dovetails with the first is because let's say you did have a net of $7,000 above your living expenses. You don't necessarily need to, or nor is it necessarily wise to put all $7,000 toward the credit card debt. Maybe you should be doing $2,000 toward your high yield savings account to start to build up your emergency fund of cash, and then direct $5,000 a month toward the credit card. You got $21,000 in credit card debt. You'll still have it paid off in a little bit over 4 months, and that's a good situation. So, while if you were to do that, by the time you get to that 4-month mark, you wouldn't have just paid off your credit card debt, but you also now have about $8,000 in savings. You want to continue building up that emergency savings, though, because you'll have some mile markers that you want to hit in order to fully protect yourself. The point of the emergency fund is to protect your mind when difficult and unexpected financial decisions come up. It's for emergencies. Deductible on your car if there's an accident, or deductible on your home if a tree falls on the roof, things like that. You want to have a place where there is cash ready to pay for such things, and you're not having to scramble. And while you're in training, this was a pipe dream, right? But now you actually have the means to do this, and you should. Because not only does it help you to pay for things if and when they come up, but it also then will protect your subsequent investment behavior later on. And that's something that we haven't gotten into yet today, but we will in a future episode. This is the groundwork. This is the foundation. So you want to keep building up that emergency fund above the $8,000 mark, because that's definitely not enough for an emergency fund for a typical physician. First, you want to reach for 1 month worth of expenses. Now, if your monthly expenses happen to be something like $8,000 per month, then sure, you would have reached that first goal after 4 months. You got $8,000. That's great. You want to keep building, though. You want to then get up to 3 months worth of expenses during this time. This may change after some time where you've really started to build savings and investments, but it's a good guide to go by right now. 3 months of expenses. So in this hypothetical situation I've created, that's $24,000. Now, let's say you had that $21,000 in credit card debt paid off after 4 months. And so you had dedicated $2,000 a month toward the high yield savings account. You got $8,000. You've got $16,000 to go. But now you don't have any credit card debt to pay off, do you? Now you can redirect that $5,000 that was going toward the credit card debt also toward your emergency fund. You'll get there pretty quick, won't you? In another 3.5 months, you'll have filled up your emergency fund. So in 7 months out of training, you have paid off that $21,000 in credit card debt and built up an emergency fund. So these are things that you can do with some simple cash flow calculations. Knowing what it costs for you to live, knowing what your paychecks are going to be and their cadence, and then setting your priorities for paying off high interest debt and building up your emergency savings. Now let's talk about one more step that you can take. Possibly, and I say possibly because first step 1 and 2 are more important than this step 3. But if you're able to take care of step 1 and 2 and also step 3 concurrently, it's worth considering. Maxing out your 401k or 403b. That is the primary retirement plan option that most physicians have access to. Now, if you're a 1099 doc and you're going into practice like, say, anesthesia or emergency medicine or something wherein you don't have an employer-employee relationship, this option still exists for you in the form of the solo 401k. But let's just say that you have addressed step 1 and 2, and you still think like, well, I've laid out the map for like September, October, November, December. And I'm saying those months because a lot of new attendings, they start their jobs in either August or September of the academic year, right? But whatever time of year it is that you're starting, this can apply. You have until the end of a calendar year to put the maximum amount into a 401k or a 403b. Both of those retirement accounts for our purposes are pretty much the same. And the maximum that you as an employee can put in is $23,500. So if you break that out into you divide that out by the number of paychecks that you're going to be getting between now and the end of the year, and it's feasible for you to max that out, then that might be worth adding in to your cash flow plan and related retirement savings plan. One thing to note, if you were contributing to your fellowship program or residency program's 403b plan, you need to account for those contributions in this calculation because the $23,500 maximum, that is a cumulative maximum between all 401k and 403b accounts that you have access to as an employee. Now, there are employer contributions. If you are a 1099 doc and you are playing both the role of employee-employer, that's a different scenario. We'll talk about that another time. But as far as the employee contributions are concerned, that $23,500 for 2025, that number will change each year, tends to. You have to make sure that you're not over-contributing. So if you did, say you put $1,000 in over the course of January to June in your fellowship, when you were in fellowship, you have to subtract that from $23,500, so you got $22,500 that you could additionally put in to your new employer's 403b or 401k plan. If that, spread that out over the course of, say, either 4 or 8 paychecks or something, whatever it ends up being for your situation, if you can fit that into your cash flow plan, then that is a really great way to supercharge your retirement savings plan. Normally, you have 12 months to do it, and so the per paycheck pressure will be less come January. But if you can do it between now and the end of the calendar year, it's not a bad idea at all to consider it. There are other retirement plans that may also be available to you, like 457B deferred compensation plans and such. Let's not overcomplicate this episode because you've got a lot going on, not just with finances, but professionally. The buck stops with you now, right? You have independent practice responsibilities, and I've heard many, many times there's a lot of pressure on you. So it's good to focus on what is achievable and not to overdo it. If you were to accomplish steps 1 and 2 and not 3, it's something to be very proud of. If you can do all 3, that's amazing. But those are a few things that you can do with that first attending paycheck. Address that problem with analysis, conversation with your family, if you're married, kids, whatever. But if you take these steps, you're going to be making good use of those first big attending paychecks. Thanks for listening today, and we'll talk soon.